Hi, my name is Bethany, and today I want to talk to you about ASAN, or the Autism Self Advocacy Network, ending their partnership with Sesame Street. Now for this video, I am going to refer to the Autism Self Advocacy Network as ASAN because that's just how I read it when I see the letters, and it's a lot faster than saying the whole name. So if you're not familiar with what's going on here, ASAN and Sesame Street had actually been collaborating on something called the See Amazing project. I'm not sure, I think Sesame Street, that's like their thing, and ASAN was collaborating with them on that. They worked on the character Julia on Sesame Street. So now, thanks to this video, my recommended does include random videos on Sesame Street, and it's not really something I'm normally interested in, so the things I do for you guys. Anyway, Julia is an autistic character on Sesame Street, and I was watching videos to kind of get a feel for how they portrayed Julia, and I really appreciated the way they showed her. They showed her family not being all like, oh no, we gotta take Julia to this, or oh no, Julia's not doing blah 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 right, or what is she doing, blah blah blah. It was just very fun, everyone together, very happy family together, and when her friends played with her, they understood that she had limits and she had boundaries and she had things that she did differently, and that was okay. And they had like Big Bird meet Julia, and you know, the kind of the first impressions that a child or a person might have of a child on the spectrum, and you know, like, why do they not immediately respond to me and stuff like that. You can check out those videos yourself. So it was really nice to see that and to have that representation for autistic children. Well, basically what happened was Sesame Street decided to partner with our favorite organization, Autism Speaks. If you're not clear, that is sarcasm. ASAN basically said that this is going to be a negative impact and we highly recommend you not do this. And they did it anyway. So I'm going to read very quickly the article that ASAN released stating that they've ended their partnership, and then I'm going to go look into the document that probably most concerns ASAN according to their article with you guys. ASAN has ended partnership with Sesame Street. August 5th, 2019, the Autistic Self Advocacy Network condemns Sesame Street's decision to further stigma against autistic children and adults in their new public service announcements. For several years, ASAN consulted with Sesame Street on their See Amazing project and the development of their autistic character, Julia. Until this summer, the content Sesame Street produced showed parents that their autistic children could live great lives and taught autistic and neurotypical children ways to become friends. Through this approach, See Amazing successfully encouraged the inclusion of autistic children in their communities and had a widespread positive impact. Sesame Street has now decided to undo that process. Its latest PSAs featuring Julia promote Autism Speaks' Screen for Autism initiative and their resource for parents of newly diagnosed autistic children, the 100-Day Kit. Like much of Autism Speaks' recent advertising, these PSAs use the language of acceptance and understanding to push resources that further stigma and treat autistic people as burdens on our families. The 100-Day Kit encourages parents to blame family difficulties on their autistic child. Here they include somewhat of a quoted line: when you find yourself arguing with your spouse, be careful not to get mad at each other when it really is the autism that has you so upset and angry. And to view autism as a terrible disease from which their child can, quote, get better. It recommends compliance-based, quote, therapies and a pseudoscientific, quote, autism diets, but fails to educate families about communication supports. It even instructs parents to go through the 5 stages of grief after learning that their child is autistic as they would if the child had died. We discussed with Sesame Street repeatedly and in great detail what this decision would mean for the autistic community. We explained to them how these ideas harm autistic children and our families, and reinforce a societal prejudice against autistic people. Our contacts acknowledged that the Autism Speaks resources were harmful and portrayed autistic children in a negative light, yet they were unwilling to reverse course in their plans to promote them. As a result, we have formally ended our partnership with Sesame Street. So for time's sake, basically the rest of the article just kind of goes into how autistic children have been portrayed in a negative light, and that the See Amazing project and everything that was going on was really great, but now they've decided to do this. They understand, they say that Sesame Street understands the position that they're in, etc. So what I noticed, kind of, other than, you know, the fact that we're in general not fans of Autism Speaks here, is the main concern of the 100-day kit for parents of newly diagnosed autistic children. So I took it upon myself to come look at this document. One thing that I think ASAN pointed out that I don't know if it's necessarily fairly portrayed is the idea of encouraging parents to go through the stages of grief as if their child had died. The reason I think that this is fair to include for parents is because parents often, when their child is level 3 autistic, they had all these ideas of what their child was going to be like, and having to accept that that isn't reality can be tough. I don't think it's fair to just be like, oh, whatever, like, you just get over it. That's not really fair. I think that there should be resources for parents. Do I think it's appropriate for every parent to feel compelled to go through the stages of grief because their child is autistic? No, absolutely not. To like dismiss that and say like, oh, you just think your child died. No, but I can see why people would think that with Autism Speaks' history. If you're not familiar with why people aren't such a fan of Autism Speaks, I highly, highly recommend you to watch my 3-part video series on Autism Speaks. Is it this side? This side? It's one of these sides. I will put a card for the first part so you guys can fully understand why Autism Speaks can be very controversial. But at the end of my series and the end of my research, it seemed like Autism Speaks had done quite a bit of a turnaround, at least in a lot of their language use and some of their resources and such. But then we get this gem. So I have highlighted parts I would like to just point out from this. You are obviously welcome to look through the whole thing. I was appalled several times at some of the implications in this toolkit. I don't think it's the greatest toolkit in the world. If my mom had received this toolkit when I was a child, if she had known I had autism and received this toolkit, she would have probably been devastated, and in my opinion, there's no reason for that. Obviously, I grew up without a diagnosis, so she didn't know in the first place, but I could just imagine my mom reading this, or me as a parent, or someone as a parent reading this about their child who got an autism diagnosis and thinking it's like the end of the world. So I'm going to go ahead and read some things I highlighted. I got so angry I had to quit doing this for a while and come back to it. So we're just going to do this together. I'm going to try to get through it quickly because I know this video is probably going to end up quite long. So on page 5, one of the paragraphs, the second paragraph, begins with, quote, "While autism is usually a lifelong condition, we know that at any age there can be significant benefits from interventions or therapies that can reduce symptoms and increase skills and abilities." So right off the bat, we are suggesting to parents that sometimes autism is not lifelong. And this is something that gets me really upset, and something that parents and I think even medical professionals do not understand. Here's the matter of fact, okay? Autism is a difference in the way your brain works. Whether you like the neurodivergent, whatever it's called, neurodiversity movement or not, the fact of the matter is there have been multiple studies. Autistic brains are different than neurotypical brains. Doesn't matter if you believe in the whole neurodiversity thing or not. At the end of the day, our brains are different. So please someone tell me how apparently some people magically have their brain completely change. What they're talking about is people losing their diagnosis. So what that means is they have figured out how to mask enough, or that apparently a therapist has decided that their life isn't negatively affected enough to be considered autistic. That does not change someone from being autistic. Autism is not a list of symptoms. It is not a list of behaviors. It is literally how the person is wired. It doesn't matter how much that person has learned how to cope, they are still autistic. So this is already misleading, already telling parents like, your child might be in that tiny little percent that magically becomes not autistic. Then we have this lovely line, quote, "By 8 to 10 months of age, many infants who go on to develop autism are showing some symptoms such as failure to respond to their names, reduced interest in people, and delayed babbling." go on to develop. Are you kidding me? I feel like we've already had this conversation. I feel like Autism Speaks, we've already gone through this issue where we had the whole belief in things causing autism. And later in this exact same paper, toolkit, whatever, they talk about that those external factors do not cause autism. So someone tell me how they magically develop autism after 8 to 10 months of age, because it says by 8 to 10 months of age, many infants who go on to develop autism, the child is born autistic. I'm mad. Like, I'm livid. Y'all, I am livid. Okay, listen. This gives people the idea that their child at 8 to 10 months of age didn't have autism and somehow has developed autism after the fact. That is not scientifically supported. Why is this happening? I am mad because I just wasted a ton of my life, okay, doing a video where I talked all up in Autism Speaks business, like all up in Autism Speaks business, and they finally got to the point where they weren't spewing nonsense like this, but they have the audacity to mislead. Currently, this is a current file, which I believe that they edited, and I'll tell you why. This is a relatively current file from my understanding, okay, that they are promoting through their partnership with Sesame Street, that is basically telling you that some people lose their autism, so they're not autistic anymore, and people develop autism. No. We don't diagnose autism until a certain age because we want to be sure. We don't want to say someone has autism or is autistic until we know for a fact. And the signs are not always very concrete or reliable until a certain age. That's why most of the time they don't want to diagnose until about 5 years old and say that is a reliable autism diagnosis. Does that mean that that child from before 5 years old wasn't autistic or developed autism in that time? No. Ooh, I'm so irritated. I'm sorry. If y'all don't like ranting, you're not gonna like this video. I am like upset. We're going over this together. I don't care if you get mad that I'm upset. Some of y'all don't like me upset, but deal with it. All right, so they included something, an excerpt from Does My Child Have Autism by Wendy Stone. And I guess this part was titled, How Can My Child Have Autism When He Seems So Smart? So cute. Isn't that cute? And then there's this lovely concept that makes me so angry. Quote, what accounts for this unique learning style? In a word, motivation. They're implying that the only reason autistic people don't learn how to do certain things is because they're not motivated. How many freaking times do we have to go over this kind of thing? While autism, yes, is a difference in neurology, there is a reason it's considered a disability. These are disabled children, okay? If I sat you in a room with a wall of code in Chinese and you don't know Chinese, and I gave you some random stuff, and I sat you in that room without food, without water, without anything, and said, once you figure out this code, it'll give you a special thing that will unlock this door. Do you think that person's motivated? Of course they're motivated. Of course they're freaking motivated. But how do they don't know how to read Chinese. They don't have access to the internet. They can't just Google it and figure out Google Translate how to get out of here. They have to somehow magically figure out with no point of reference how to do something? Are they not motivated enough? Why can autistic children sometimes learn these other things? That's because they've found a point of reference and now they can make that thing happen. But if you have 0 point of reference, and you want to just sit here and be like, oh, well, it's just your child's not motivated. That's why they're not learning that. That just makes me mad, but we're going to move on. Now, in this 100-day toolkit for parents, yeah, I'm full in the ranting. We've got the hand going and everything. So we have this next thing that says, anecdotal evidence suggests that some children may be helped by dietary intervention for GI issues, including the elimination of dairy and gluten-containing foods. Then they include something for the gluten-free casein, however you say that, free diet in the treatment section of the kit. Anecdotal evidence. What is anecdotal evidence? Anecdotal evidence is evidence from anecdotes, evidence collected in a casual or informal manner and relying heavily or entirely on personal testimony. You know what that's another word for? Not scientific. Yeah, there's no actual evidence, no actual analytical actually tested scientific evidence that this works, but don't worry, we're gonna include it for you parents, and we're gonna give you links to how to do it. Oh, that's an argument for another day. So then again, we have the stages associated with grieving. Again, I told you my thoughts on this before. I do think that in some situations, this might be something for the parents to do. I get that most cases you don't really need to grieve that, but some cases where your child is going to need a lot of support a lot of their lives and it's not going to look anything like you expected it to, that might be hard for you, but do that in private. I want to do a video in the future on that just to make sure that we kind of understand that people go through emotional things, absolutely. And it is hard to hear that, you know, there are things going on, but the way this is framed, it's very like, oh my gosh, this horrible tragedy happened to your child. So let's read something here. Expressing your anger releases tension. It is an attempt to tell the people around you that you are hurt and are outraged. I think that's supposed to say you are hurt. That this diagnosis has happened to your child. Kind of a weird wording. It didn't happen to them, but I understand this might be written in such a way to help people going through the process. I can't speak to that. I didn't go through that process. But what I love here is this quote that they included from some random person that they don't attribute it to. Quote, "I felt angry when a child at my son's school was diagnosed with leukemia around the time our son was diagnosed with autism. Everyone sent cards and cooked dinners for them. They didn't know I needed that kind of help too. When I let people know I needed help, they came through for me." Now, correct me if I'm wrong, because I could be wrong. Doesn't that mean that kid could die? Maybe that's why the family needed all that support and cards. Your child's battling something that could cause them to die. And you're over here like, oh, my child's brain works different. I need cards and food too. Like, I'm glad that you got your support or whatever, but it is not the same thing. Get over yourself, Karen. None of these are attributed, probably because these people don't want to be connected with these quotes. My husband had a harder time accepting our son's diagnosis at first. That's pretty normal. When Max began making progress in his ABA program, everything changed for the better. My husband only accepted that my son was autistic once he got better from being autistic with ABA therapy. Y'all, I am in a mood right now. This paper puts me in a mood. This is just a rant video at this point. This is why, by the way, this, I have the laptop in front of me to read from. This is why ASAN broke off their partnership with Sesame Street, because Sesame Street is okay with this paper being distributed to newly diagnosed autistic people's parents. Yeah. Acceptance. Ultimately, you may feel a sense of acceptance. It's helpful to distinguish between accepting that your child has been diagnosed with autism and accepting autism. Excuse me? Why is that helpful to distinguish? It's helpful to distinguish between the fact that your child has been diagnosed with autism and accepting autism. Please tell me what you mean to say is that you should also accept the fact that your child is autistic. I hope that you mean to say that it's okay to accept autism, because you're accepting an integral part of who your child is. I sure hope that it does not read the way that I read it, the connotation that it's okay, you're accepting that your child was diagnosed. That doesn't mean you have to accept the autism. That better not be the way I read it first. I don't know. It's too vague for me because it doesn't... Nope. I read the next line. Never mind, y'all are crap. Accepting the diagnosis simply means that you're ready to advocate for your child. Is this supposed to make parents feel better? Like, oh, it's okay, you didn't accept the autism, you're just accepting that they were diagnosed, now you can be an advocate. What? I I'm mad. I'm just mad. Like, I'm just mad. I'm just mad right now. Although the child with autism may never experience the negative emotions associated with the diagnosis, parents, siblings, and extended family members may each process the diagnosis in different ways and at different rates. While it's true that people are going to process this differently, for some people it is difficult. However, I guarantee you, if this is the kind of feeling that that child gets from you, they're going to experience a whole heck of a lot of negative emotions associated with their autism diagnosis. I'm mad. If you haven't noticed, I am mad. I'm very mad. Autism is a pervasive, multifaceted disorder. It will not only change the way that you look at your child, it will change the way you look at the world. What does that even mean? Let's just hope that's for the positive. Let's just be positive and hope that's for the positive. There are many details you'll be managing in an intensive treatment program, especially if it's based in your home. So immediately they're like, okay, yeah, you're done grieving. Don't have to accept the autism. Just accept that your child was diagnosed with it. Now start getting them treated so they don't have to be so autistic. That's just how this is reading to me. I'm just mad. I'm just mad. Unfortunately, there is more information on the web than any of us have time to read in a lifetime. Quote, there may also be a lot of misinformation, like contained in this toolkit. Y'all don't understand the amount of anger that is coming out of me right now. Kay Butler, who has a recently diagnosed son, describes her experience being part of the autism community, the whole thing, and part of it says this other mom was reaching out to make a connection, to find someone else who struggles on a daily basis like she does. I hope that's not how you feel about your children. Like, okay. I'm gonna give you guys some room because I don't want to keep driving the parent autistic wedge. That's kind of why I'm partnering with the other Stephanie to talk about things that I think is important for us all to talk about. So I can see maybe they're struggling with trying to figure out what the best thing for their child is, because there is a lot of information. This thing itself right here is confusing. You know, you have all the experts who think they know what they're talking about, then you have different information from people who actually are autistic, and there's a lot of things going on. But if you're saying that you struggle every day because your child is autistic, not because like of all the pressure put on you to fix your child to make sure that they're perfect, but just because like, oh, I can't deal with my kid. I would hate to think that my parents thought, God, if I just didn't have an autistic child, I wouldn't struggle every day like this. I surely hope that is not the way you see your children. Again, we have a quote. For example, infants who later develop autism. Again, this is misinformation. Show me the studies that say an autistic person has developed it from a certain age. No. We see things to do with genetics. We see that there are increased risk factors to do with while the person is pregnant, but those happen to be things that do with the actual development in the womb. So when we are born, we're autistic. We don't develop autism. What is this? And again, to me, that's gonna try to put some sort of guilt on somebody. Like, if I didn't just do X, Y, and Z, my child would not have developed autism. They don't, quote, go on to develop autism. That's not correct. And they've done this multiple times now. But once he had a formal diagnosis, everyone cut us a lot of slack, and instead of wondering what the heck was wrong with us as parents, most people we knew admitted to a newfound respect for us dealing with so much. So here's one thing that was kind of quoted in the ASAN article, but it reads differently, and I really think that they went back and edited this just from the way it sounds. So if you find yourself arguing with your spouse over an autism-related issue, try to remember that this topic can be difficult for both of you, and be careful not to get mad at each other when it really when it really the challenges you're facing together that have you so upset and angry, or have you upset and angry. So with this, I really think that they decided to change it. Something about the grammar fail somewhere in there, and the fact that ASAN had quoted earlier. I really think that they're trying to say, like, they're trying to make it sound better after they got called out for that. Later on in that same thing, they say everyone in your family needs support and to be happy despite the circumstances. I'm happy, so happy that people can be happy around me, despite the fact that I'm autistic. That must just be so freaking horrible. Well, it is okay to be sad that you have a brother or sister affected by autism. Oh, I'm so tired of hearing that. Affected by autism. Everyone's affected by autism. Touched by autism. And look, I know it's different. I get that it's different for different levels of autism. But constantly driving on how people are affected by autism like it's something that touched them or something that came and got them. Ugh. It's just really frustrating. Now we're getting into services. There is no debate or doubt. Early intervention is your child's best hope for the future. Early attention to improving the core behavioral symptoms of autism will give your child and the rest of the family several important benefits that you will not gain if you take a wait-and-see approach until your child enters school at age 4 or 5. Now here's the deal. I think that it is really helpful to do some considered early intervention, where that is teaching the child maybe how to manage their emotions, how to communicate in a way that is good for them so that they're not just pent up and frustrated. But that doesn't really seem like what they're saying here. They're saying fix the behavior problems so once they get in school they can just be as normal as possible and everyone's great, because otherwise your child's gonna be terrible. It will offer resources, support, and training that will enable you to work and play with your child more effectively. Since when is play supposed to be effective? Treatment for autism is usually a very intensive, comprehensive undertaking that involves the child's entire family and a team of professionals. The recommended number of hours of structured intervention ranges from 25 to 40 hours per week during the preschool period. They're kids. Oh my God, just let them be kids. Like, I get some intervention. I get some like ways really for the family to learn how to support their child and that child to learn how to do things that will help them in situations. But I don't think that's what they're talking about, especially because of how much they praise certain things in here. The gluten-free, casein-free, or whatever diet, the GFCF, which they've mentioned before. So it seems like they might be kind of a fan of it. They mention it again, and then they're like, well, there is minimal evidence that it improves autism-related behaviors. Yeah. So and then that's in the middle, and then they continue to go on about it, about how you should do this and how you would properly go about doing this diet. That we've already said was basically only based on anecdotal evidence, which basically means no scientific evidence, which probably is the exact same minimal evidence that they're quoting here, but whatever, you know. We do know that many children get better with intensive behavioral therapy. Oh, I'm sorry. Did we forget that autism isn't an illness? Did we forget that autism isn't a disease? What does better mean? It makes sense to focus on getting your child engaged in an intensive behavioral program before looking at other interventions. So at least they're trying to say to not try the weird, crazy therapies until you've done the intervention ones. Okay. Is there a cure? It is estimated that approximately 10% of children lose their diagnosis of autism. I've already talked to you about my feelings about that and the reality behind how that happens. The factors that predict which children lose their diagnosis are unknown. Children initially diagnosed with autism who lose their diagnosis often have residual difficulties in the areas of hyperactivity, anxiety, and depressive symptoms. Symptom reduction from autism is usually reported in connection with intensive early intervention, but it is unknown how much or which type of intervention works best, or whether the recovery can be fully credited to the intervention. Oh, that makes me so mad. either those 10%, again, were either misdiagnosed, first of all. They could have been misdiagnosed with autism. A reassessment said, no, that's actually not autism, something else is going on. But what I think is probably most likely is these are children who were level 1 autistic, who learned how to mask, and they went to somebody who decided that, it's just anxiety, it's just depression, it's just ADHD. It's not really autism because they're just not impaired enough to be really autistic, so they're not actually autistic anymore. That's not how this freaking works. And then, oh my god, a full recovery? A full recovery! Really putting parents in that place of hope, like, maybe my child can be that 10%. If we find that right intervention, maybe they can be fully recovered. I really hope that parents don't really think like this. And if they do, that breaks my heart. Then they're talking about basically getting all your professionals together, and they kind of give some unrealistic ideals for how that would go. One thing they say is it's a good idea to have him or her bring a video of a therapy session conducted with another child. This offers yet another view of his or her teaching skills. If possible, observe the therapist working with another child. That is not typically legal due to HIPAA, unless if the parents have already like signed something that says that people can observe their child's therapy. Most cases in private therapy environments, you are not allowed to see them working with another child in their therapy. So that's really weird that they would say that. I have never heard of people actually like setting up interviews for their therapists and stuff like that. That's really weird stuff that sounds just like not reasonable. So they did like this thing to break it down into the first 100 days. I'm a little concerned. There's something you should see here. Week 3, you should play with your child twice. It's just in there. It's like, play with your child. Week 1, just says stuff. Week 2, normal stuff. And then week 3, play with your child. And then set aside sibling time. And then play with your child again. And I'm like, were you not playing with your child the last couple weeks? And then you don't hear about playing with your child for a while. You have some sibling time. Week 9, you should play with your child again. So that's not weird at all. I just find that that's just kind of random that they're like, yeah, and this week you should probably play with your kid. Actually, this week it's important to play with them twice, so do that. Anyway, that is my assessment, I guess, my review, my reaction, my feelings, my ranting about the 100-day kit, and why ASAN for sure was not on board with co-signing basically with Sesame Street to say, yeah, that's a good idea. It's not a good idea. That toolkit is a piece of trash. That's my personal opinion. I'm gonna link the exact file that I found in the description below. Hopefully they don't take it off because I'm interested in it. I'm sure they wouldn't because they're promoting it. But I want you to read it if you feel like it. You can get the full context of everything. If you feel like I misrepresented something, let me know. But I mean, it is sad to see that ASAN will no longer be working with Sesame Street on the character Julia, but I hope that Sesame Street will at least be working on continuing that autistic affirming, positive, non-harmful, I guess, characterization of Julia. I really liked her character, for a children's show and stuff like that, that it wasn't, ooh, there's autism, or oh, the poor parents. It was just everyone was being a family, and it was beautiful, and I think that's how it should be. Even if, with Julia, she does a lot of echolalia. Instead of being frustrated at her, why doesn't she blah, blah, blah. Oh yeah, Julia, blah, blah, blah. They just include her like a person, like we're people. Oh my gosh. Not that we're sick, diseased freaks who are gonna apparently just die from our terrible autism. So yeah, there's the gist on that. I wanted to just go in depth into exactly what the 100-day toolkit was actually saying and why ASAN was so adamant about either like you pull from that or we pull from you. And yeah, so Sesame Street, ASAN no longer cooperating on that. That sucks, but it really sucks that Sesame Street decided to do that with Autism Speaks. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. I know it's probably quite long, quite ranty, quite loud. I apologize. I want to know what your thoughts are. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give me a thumbs up, or if this informed you in any way about kind of what's going on in the autism world. Again, thumbs up. Let me know in the comments below. If you want to hear autism related content from me, I try to post to this channel about those things every Thursday at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. I hope that you're having a wonderful week, and I'll talk to you in my next video. Bye!